Hi, I am Niharika Nanda, and you are listening to Three Things, the Indian Express news show. Last week, Prime Minister Narendra Modi and President Donald Trump met in the US, marking the first such bilateral meeting since Trump returned to power 4 weeks ago. This meeting served as the beginning of a new chapter in the relationship between the two countries, with new initiatives and deliberations being announced across various fields, from trade and defense to emerging technologies and AI.
I'm thrilled to welcome the Prime Minister of India, my friend, Narendra Modi, back to the White House. We spent a lot of time here and a lot of time in India, and he's a very special man. Prime Minister, it is a pleasure to extend to you the same hospitality that you showed Melania and myself when we traveled to your beautiful country 5 years ago. It's hard to believe, so long ago, and it seemed like yesterday. It was beautiful. We opened the cricket stadium. 120.
Now, while India and the US have maintained a strong relationship, this meeting at the White House further strengthened their ties. Today's episode is dedicated to discussing the key highlights of the bilateral meeting, and to discuss these details, we are joined by the Indian Express's Diplomatic Affairs editor, Shubhajit Roy. So, Shubhajit, this was the first meeting between US and India after fresh elections were held in both the countries. Can you share what significance does this meeting hold?
Well, you're right, Niharika. This is the first meeting between Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Donald Trump after both of them returned to power. And especially because Mr. Trump, who was out of power for 4 years, he is now back in power. In the last 3 weeks, he has, really disrupted, tried to change the system by what is called a shock and awe strategy in the United States. And in this kind of a disruptive environment, Prime Minister Modi is the fourth leader to visit White House within 4 weeks of Trump coming back to the White House. And that is unusual, that is rare. No Indian Prime Minister has gone to the White House so early on in a US president's tenure.
नमस्कार. सबसे पहले मैं मेरे प्रिय मित्र राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप को मेरे शानदार स्वागत और आतिथ्य सत्कार के लिए हार्दिक आभार व्यक्त करता हूं. राष्ट्रपति ट्रंप ने भारत और अमेरिका संबंधों को अपने नेतृत्व से संजोया है, जीवंत बनाया है. जिस उत्साह से
And precisely because of the fact that it's a very dynamic, very disruptive environment because of President Trump, he brings to the table a very aggressive position on immigration as well as on trade. So on both those issues, India has had concerns, and it was felt by Indian government, Indian establishment, that it's best to have a face-to-face, in-person meeting with the US president to sort out the issues that were seen to be hot button and could become a very, very disruptive issue.
Right, and Prime Minister Modi and President Trump have shared a rapport over the years. Can you talk a little bit about that, and how has that relationship impacted both the countries?
Yeah, so both Prime Minister Modi and President Trump come from the conservative side of the political spectrum. Both of them take pride in the fact that they've both been outsiders to the capital's politics or the country's politics. And they actually struck a rapport last time when President Trump came to power in 2017. Prime Minister Modi visited the White House in June 2017, within 5 months of him assuming office. And since then, they met regularly. The Indian Prime Minister held a public event, an Indian diaspora event in Houston in September 2019, and where it was called the Howdy Modi, which was also attended by President Trump.
Good morning, Texas. Good morning, America. Greetings to my fellow Indians in India and around the world. Friends, this morning we have a very special person with us. He needs no introduction.
After that, President Trump visited India in February 2020, and he was hosted by Prime Minister in Ahmedabad, where there was a big event. So they struck a rapport at that point of time. But in the last, say, 3 months or so, since President Trump won the elections in November 2024, that is November last year, Prime Minister Modi spoke to him twice, once in November to congratulate him, and again in late January, a week after he was sworn in as the US president. In fact, and the Indian government had also reached out to the Trump team by sending External Affairs Minister S. Shashank, who went first in December last week, and again he went as the Prime Minister's special envoy and on behalf of the Indian government to attend the president's swearing-in ceremony in January. So this is the kind of interaction they've had in the past, and they sought to build on this working relationship, this rapport, and continue the conversation forward on the issues of mutual interest.
Right. And Shubhajit, what were the major topics that were discussed by the two leaders during their meeting?
Well, there were a number of things. Firstly, if the issue of tariffs, which President Trump has, often said is the most beautiful word in the English dictionary, and he's talked about the fact that how India is a big abuser of tariffs, is the tariff king.
India, which is the tariff king, they called us and they say, we want to start negotiations immediately. When Bob Lighthizer said, what happened? You would never do this. They said, no, we want to keep your president happy. Isn't that nice?
Apart from that, there was also discussion on immigration, in which obviously Indian side has said that they will take back illegal immigrants once they're verified. The two countries also discussed on defense sales, especially because Trump is interested that if India buys American defense equipment, that would bridge the trade deficit. Right now, in about the bilateral trade amounts to about $200 billion. And of which there's a trade deficit of about $40 to $50 billion, in which and India has a surplus, and that's what irks President Trump. So Trump wants that India should buy American defense equipment. Apart from that, US also said, Trump wants that India should buy energy, oil and natural gas from the US. So Trump feels that if these two commodities, these two items are bought by India, then this trade deficit can be bridged. Apart from that, they also had discussions on the conversation on this critical and emerging technologies, which was started by the Biden era, but this time they have renamed it, but are going to continue, which that deals with AI and quantum computing and semiconductors and all the high-tech stuff.
As you mentioned, over this visit, one major thing that was discussed was the Initiative on Critical and Emerging Technologies, which was also renamed. Can you tell us about that and what else was focused on as far as technology is concerned?
Well, as I said, that was one of the major achievements of the Biden administration, which they had announced at that point of time, and the national security advisors of both sides had started the negotiations, and they were implementing the collaboration on AI and supercomputing and quantum computing, and Indian government wants high technology from the US. So this time they renamed it to what is called Trust. So the acronym is called Trust. The full form, it stands for Transforming the Relationship Utilizing Strategic Technology. So they will work on that. And as you know, the recent months, there have been a lot of conversation on the race for dominance in the field of AI, with China releasing DeepSeek as an AI application, an AI chatbot, which is competing and competitive enough with OpenAI and other American AI models. And that has been done at a fraction of the cost.
Nvidia is down nearly 12%, Oracle is down nearly 7%, and Microsoft is down nearly 4%. Most tech stocks in the US are in pain. The trigger is DeepSeek.
I think the stock market is looking at DeepSeek and they're saying, oh my gosh, here is a company who has found a way to make pretty high quality AI much more widely available for much cheaper.
Let's talk about DeepSeek, because it is mind-blowing and it is shaking this entire industry to its core. The emergence of DeepSeek now putting pressure on the U.S. tech names. We told you all about it last week.
So from that perspective as well, the two countries were discussed that they should have a roadmap on accelerating AI infrastructure by the end of the year. So these are the things that they discussed. They also discussed about critical minerals and advanced materials and pharmaceuticals and their resilient supply chains, which essentially means that China is being the supplier and there's been question mark over its reliability. So India wants to partner with the United States for trusted supply chains. So these are the things that were agreed and are going to be part of the Trust initiative as well.
Right, and it is being said that US and India are also planning on multilateral initiatives across Western Indian Ocean, Middle East, and the Indo-Pacific. So how do they plan on going about that?
Yeah, so there are a host of multilateral initiatives that were announced or are being planned. I mean, the both leaders, they decided to activate new initiatives under the Quad grouping. They plan to sort of convene partners from the IMEC corridor, that is the India, Middle East, Europe corridor, and the I2U2 group, which is I2U2 stands for India, Israel, UAE, and United States group within the next 3 months in order to announce new initiatives in 2025.
इस वक्त भारत में होने जा रही क्वाड समिट में हम पार्टनर देशों के साथ नए क्षेत्रों में सहयोग बढ़ाएंगे.
And they also launched a new bilateral Indian Ocean strategic venture. Apart from that, they're also expected to announce new partnership initiatives across Western Indian Ocean, Middle East, and Indo-Pacific. So, this is interesting because this comes at a time when President Trump has been sort of talking about walking out of multilateral groupings and initiatives. And he has walked out of Paris Climate Agreement, the WHO, and has threatened NATO countries in sharing the burden. At that point of time, he and the Indian Prime Minister agreeing to launch or activate new multilateral initiatives is an interesting layer of cooperation where the two sides are looking at strengthening these groupings and other groupings in the near future.
And Shubhajit, in the beginning, you had mentioned immigration. Now, ever since President Trump came to power, his focus has been on deporting illegal immigrants. And India too has many illegal immigrants who have been living in the US and are now being sent back. So can you talk about the concerns that India has regarding that?
Yeah, so, it's not a secret that there are Indian illegal immigrants. They are pretty large in number, about 7.25 lakh Indians, which is about 725,000 people in the US who are illegally staying there, according to US government figures, and of which 20,000 have been identified to be ready to be deported. Now, a plane load of 104 people came last week to India. And now we are also getting information that over the next few days, more such planes carrying illegal immigrants will come back. Now, Indian government has stated this, and Prime Minister Modi today reiterated that, Indian government would accept illegal immigrants who come back after verification that they are indeed Indians, Indian nationals, Indian citizens. But he also said that there would be action against the ecosystem of agents who are or people who are involved in human trafficking.
जहां तक भारत और अमेरिका का सवाल है, हमने हमेशा कहा है कि जो वेरीफाइड होगा, कि जो सच्चे अर्थ में भारत का ही नागरिक होगा, वो अगर अमेरिका में गैर कानूनी तरीके से रहता है तो उसको वापस लेने के लिए भारत तैयार है। लेकिन बात हमारे लिए वहां से रुकती नहीं है। ये सामान्य परिवारों के बच्चे होते हैं, उनको बड़े बड़े सपने दिखाए जाते हैं और उनको ज्यादातर ऐसे होते हैं उनको गुमराह करके लाया जाता है। और इसलिए ये ह्यूमन ट्रैफिकिंग में जुड़े हुए पूरे इकोसिस्टम पर हमने वार करना चाहिए। और अमेरिका और भारत मिल करके हमारी कोशिश है और हमारी कोशिश रहनी चाहिए कि इस प्रकार की पूरी इकोसिस्टम को हमें जड़ मूल से नष्ट करना चाहिए ताकि ह्यूमन ट्रैफिकिंग बंद हो और गरीब लोगों।
So I think that is what now the question is, because as per international law, if there is a illegal immigrant who belongs to your nationality, the government of the day is duty bound to accept him or her back home. So that was the conversation. And the only Indian government's ask is that this should not impact the legal immigration channels, including the H-1B visa and the other programs, other visa routes.
Another point of discussion between the two countries during this visit was the US-India Energy Security Partnership and USA's support for making India a full member of the International Energy Agency. So tell us about that.
So India is a developing country and it needs energy to grow, to develop, to power its factories or homes and transport and other things that the country needs. So from that perspective, India is looking for alternative sources of energy. And US now wants to sell LNG, natural gas, as well as oil to India.
The Prime Minister and I also reached an important agreement on energy that will restore the United States as a leading supplier of oil and gas to India. It will be hopefully their number one supplier, and the groundbreaking development for U.S. nuclear industry. India is also reforming its laws to welcome U.S. nuclear technology, which is at the highest level, into the Indian market. This will bring.
Apart from that, nuclear energy is another area where the two sides would want to take it forward. And because they signed the nuclear deal in 2008, and now they are discussing developing and establishing small modular reactors which can produce energy, electricity at a lower cost and more quickly than the large nuclear power plants. So that is the sort of thought, the direction in which the energy direct discussions took place.
न्यूक्लियर एनर्जी क्षेत्र में हमने स्मॉल मॉड्यूलर रिएक्टर्स की दिशा में सहयोग बढ़ाने पर भी बात की.
Right, and Shubhajit, from what we understand, there were talks regarding a trade deal as well.
President Trump talked about the fact that how India is a big abuser of tariffs, is the tariff king, essentially saying that India charges a lot higher tariffs than US charges on India. So there was discussion on that, and both sides agreed to launch negotiations to wrap up a trade deal by September this year. So that was a very important, significant outcome, and especially because by September, India is expected to host the Quad Leaders Summit, for which Prime Minister Modi has invited President Trump, as well as the Japanese and Australian Prime Ministers. So there is a sort of a deadline that has been set up. Last time when Trump was in power, a trade deal was being negotiated, but it could not be concluded at that point of time. So my sense is that they will pick up the threads from there and revive the negotiations.
And Shubhajit, Modi and Trump also talked about a new 10-year framework for the US-India major defense partnership in the 21st century. So can you tell us about that?
So India and US also discussed in great detail on defense equipment, and F-35 is a state-of-the-art jet fighter that President Trump said that he wants to sell to India eventually. But to start with, they would renew the 10-year defense framework, which is up for renewal this year. It was renewed in 2015, and now it is up for renewal. And apart from that, they also discussed that how India has really gained from the US defense platforms in the last few years, and the strong support, especially when it comes to dealing with China and Pakistan. And because of the border standoff in Doklam and during Galwan, both times Trump was in power at that point of time, in office at that point of time in 2017 and again in 2020. And India has benefited from buying those American platforms because it was able to move its troops and equipment and tanks and other defense equipment from the plains to the high altitudes of eastern Ladakh in relatively less amount of time, because it had those American platforms which could carry these heavy defense equipment, tanks and other equipment, as well as troops. So the defense relationship took a fair bit of conversation, and in a strategic way, it captured a fair bit of conversation between the two leaders.
डिफेंस कोऑपरेशन फ्रेमवर्क बनाया जाएगा. डिफेंस इंटरऑपरेबिलिटी, लॉजिस्टिक्स, रिपेयर और मेंटेनेंस भी इसके मुख्य भाग होंगे.
Shubhajit, beyond all of this, what else did the deliberations focus on?
So they also discussed on Bangladesh, where President Trump clearly said that it's being handled by Prime Minister Modi and India, and he left it to him to deal with the situation. They also talked about Russia-Ukraine war, and Indian Prime Minister said that India has been firmly in favor of peace through dialogue and diplomacy, and that's what the stated position has been, and Prime Minister reiterated that position. But if you really look at the entire joint statement, all the defense deals or the maritime domain awareness, all the critical and emerging technology, you would find that they're all aimed at taking on or countering China's dominance and China's assertive behavior in the Indo-Pacific region.
I would hope that China and India and Russia and US and all of us can get along. It's very important. The power of
And talking about the conflict between Russia and Ukraine and the fact that Trump had recently announced that US will take over the Gaza Strip, what role does the relationship between India and the US play in the current geopolitical scenario?
Well, India-US relationship are between two democracies with sort of shared values. And when these two countries talk, they talk from really in a sense that whether the situation in Russia-Ukraine, a conflict, or in West Asia, where again there's a conflict that's been going on, there is a sense that these two countries can talk to the parties, the players, and resolve the situation through dialogue and diplomacy. So I think that will be the effort by India and the United States to bring an end to the conflicts. And that is where the relationship and the partnership is going to sort of work towards. And Prime Minister Modi today said that India is not neutral in the conflict in Russia-Ukraine war. It is on the side of peace. And that has been the position of the Indian government. And that's what he has said. And President Trump is now in conversation with both Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky to bring an end to the war. We have to see the contours of the deal. I mean, whether Ukraine has to surrender the territory that has been captured by Russia. And those are discussions, those are debates that will now take place. Those are conversations, negotiations that will take place. But the effort is to bring the war to an end that has been ongoing for almost 3 years now.
You were listening to Three Things by the Indian Express. Today's show was edited and mixed by Suresh Pawar and produced by Shashank, Bhargava, Ichha, Sharma and me, Niharika, Nanda. If you like the show, then do subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts. You can also recommend the show to someone you think will like it. Share it with a friend or someone in your family. It's the best way for people to get to know about us. You can also tweet us at Express Audio and write to us at podcasts@indianexpress.com.